the sun, set our eyes on our Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun.
We're dealing with another strength today, and I don't know how many of those you recognize as your own, but there are 34 strengths that Gallup has identified. A 129-question online assessment will give you your top 5. And this morning, the strength that we want to deal with is strategic. People who are especially talented in the strategic theme create alternative ways to proceed. Faced with any given scenario, they can quickly spot relevant patterns and issues. They need freedom to make mid-course corrections. A person who is strategic says, what if, select, and strike. People who are especially talented in the strategic theme, they're able to sort through the clutter. They're able to consider all the possibilities. They can discard the paths that lead to nowhere. They can easily discard the paths that lead straight into resistance or that lead straight into a fog of confusion. The strategic theme is not a theme that can be taught or learned. People who are strategic, they love seeing a way when others assume there is no way. And this morning, we want to talk about Abigail as strategic, but before we talk about Abigail, it's important that we set up the story to put it in perspective. I know none of you have ever heard of King David or King Saul or David and Goliath, so humor me, if you will. David is on the run from Saul. Saul wants to kill David. And while David is on the run, he comes across a wealthy man, the herds of a wealthy man. And this man's name was Nabal. And it was approaching sheep shearing time for Nabal's flocks. And the custom at that time was that people would guard the sheep leading up to sheep shearing time so that nothing happened to them. You know, there were people out there that wanted to steal sheep. There were Philistines who would come in and raid and take sheep. There were also sheep that would wander off. And in the weeks leading up to shearing time, this was an important protection to offer. It was a very worthy and valuable protection service, and David's men provided this protection service for Nabal's flock. Now, when the shearing time came, the ranch owner then would kind of kick back. He would compensate the guys that guarded the flock. This was not a mandatory thing, but it was an ethical thing. It's like, you know, other than in New Zealand, when you go to a restaurant, you know, it's kind of commonplace to tip the waiter or the waitress. That's not in New Zealand. Trust me, I found that out the hard way. They don't do it in New Zealand. But in this time, it was customary for the landowner, the ranch owner, to kick back a little something to the guys that watch the flock. So Nabal is a very wealthy man. He has a very large herd. He has probably over 1,000 goats and over 3,000 sheep. And David's men have been guarding this flock. And they'd done an excellent job. No sheep was missing. No sheep was killed. They did great. So David tells his men this. He says, go up to Carmel, go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say to him, who lives in prosperity, obviously, peace be to you, peace to your house, and peace to all that you have. Now I have heard that you have shearers. Your shepherds were with us, and we did not hurt them, nor was there anything missing from them, all the while they were in Carmel. Ask your men, and they'll tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we have come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servants and to your son David. David's men give the message to Nabal. And this is Nabal's response. Who is David? Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? There are many slaves, many servants nowadays that break away each one from his master. Shall I then take my bread and water? And shall I take my meat that I've killed for my shearers and give it to men who I don't even know? Nabal not only refuses to tip David and his men, he insults David. Now, whether he would have done that to David's face or not is a whole other story. But he says, who is David? He knows exactly who David is. Everybody knows David. That was the title of one of the shows that was running. Everybody knows David. David killed Goliath. That kind of made its rounds when he was younger. That was the first thing. And now everybody knows that Saul is pursuing David. David's well known. That's not the problem. But what's really interesting is that what Nabal is really saying to David is not who is David, but who does David think he is to come in here and shake me down. That's his attitude. And then Nabal drives the knife a little deeper when he accuses David of being some runaway slave. David is going to be the next king. Can you say fool? Because that's exactly what Nabal is, and that's exactly what his name means, fool. So we're going to refer to him as fool for a while, if that's okay. Now, David, being the man of God, the man after God's own heart that he is, David, who wrote the Psalms, David, who spent all his time alone with God, you would think that David's response would be not violent, but it is. Because you would think that because of David's time alone with God that he wouldn't have a reaction, but he does. It doesn't save him from this reaction. You would also think that because David had just had a big victory in chapter 24 that he would be okay. But it didn't. Look at David's response. He tells his men, strap on your swords. We're going to war. He takes 400 of his men and heads towards Nabal's ranch. Meanwhile, back on the ranch, one of the servants comes running to Abigail, who is Fool's wife. Abigail. The servant comes to Abigail and says, I just thought you'd want to know that David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master. And our master yelled at them. But David's men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor did anything go missing, as long as we accompanied them when we were in the fields. They were a wall to us, both by night and day, all the time we were with them, keeping the sheep. Now, therefore, know and consider what you will do, for harm is determined against our master and against all his household, for he is such a fool that no one can speak to him. Abigail had to be thinking, my stupid husband has just put everything at risk. She fears for the security of her household, and the what-ifs start flooding her mind. They pepper her mind immediately. What if David comes and finds Nabal? What if David comes and finds Nabal and kills him? What if David comes and finds Nabal and kills everybody? What if I do something? What if I do something and I get killed? All of these thoughts, what should I do? What could I do? They all come into her mind along with all these possible scenarios. What pieces are available? What will I do? Abigail sees the disaster coming. All the what ifs. And this is a special talent, folks. It's not very many people have this talent to be able to take all this information, and it's hard for us to, we're visual. We like to see the visuals, and augmented reality isn't there yet. Give me 5 years, and I would throw it up there for you. All these scenarios fly up, and she selects one and grabs it. That's what strategic people do. All the what ifs, select, strike, boom. Abigail makes haste. She takes 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed. We're not even going to talk about that. Okay? That's just got too much written all over it. 5 sheep already dressed, a bushel of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs. She quickly loads enough food to feed 600 men. And she goes to find David. And she didn't tell her husband what she was doing. Oops. She's working out a solution. She wants to save her family. She not only sends her servants ahead, but she goes also. Meanwhile, back with David's 400 that are fast approaching the Nabal ranch, the fool ranch. This is what David's saying to his men. Surely in vain I have protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belongs to him. And he's repaid me evil for good. Notice that he doesn't mention fool's name once. He doesn't talk about this wealthy man anymore. He's talking about him. He says, that this fellow, and him, and he. I think he's a little upset. And then he goes on to say, may God do so and more also to the enemies of David if I leave one male of all who belong to him by morning light. It's fixing to get real fast. I have a feeling there's going to be some bloodshed in the morning or by morning. Abigail intercepts David and his men before they reach the ranch. And when she intercepts them, she goes before David face to the ground as the highest sign of respect. And she says, on me, my Lord, on me let this iniquity be. And please let your maidservant speak in your ears and hear the words of your maidservant. Please let not my Lord regard this scoundrel Nabal, this fool Nabal, for as his name is fool, so is he. It's important to point out that Abigail is no country bumpkin. No. Fool has married way above his pay grade. Abigail is beautiful. She's intelligent. This had to be an arranged marriage. I mean, Fool was rich. So, I mean, I'm sure it was an arranged marriage because she's definitely out of his league. And don't think for a minute that her beauty does not escape David's eyes. We all know that David had an eye for beautiful women, right? We've seen that in the Bible. She's beautiful. And I'm sure that David sees that. But one thing that's important is to understand that she's not only beautiful on the outside, but she's beautiful on the inside. That's rare. That's exceptional. Abigail is strategic. She's strategic not only in her offerings, but she's strategic in her posture and her attitudes and her language. She refers to herself 4 more times as a maidservant. A maid. She's a wealthy woman. Nabal is very wealthy. And she's referring to herself as a maidservant, and she's going, my Lord, as a servant would. Look at what she says. She says, but I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord, whom you sent. Now, therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, since the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hand, now then, let your enemies and those who seek harm from my Lord be as fool. And now, this present which your maidservant has brought to my Lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant, for the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord, and evil is not found in you throughout your days. She's taking the blame. She's taking responsibility. She's saying, forgive me, and she hasn't done anything wrong. Incredible. She goes on to say, yet a man has risen to pursue you and seek your life. But the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God. God's going to protect you, David. And the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the pocket of a sling. There's the references to the sling in David. And it shall come to pass when the Lord has done for my Lord, according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you and has appointed you ruler over Israel. David, you're going to sit on the throne. You're going to be king. And when you're king, that this will be no grief to you. You're not going to have any guilty conscience about slaying this house, nor offense of heart to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself. But when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. She's telling David, if you come and slaughter the household of fool, it's not going to look well in the public opinion. The polls are going to sink. She's trying to protect his reputation. She knows who David is. She knows what he's destined to become. And notice that at the bottom there she says, remember me. Remember me. David responds to her and says, go in peace to your house. See, I have heeded your voice and respected your person. David blesses Abigail for saving him from this action in haste. And God deals with fool the next morning, because his wife tells him the story the next morning of what she did, and he has a stroke. A stroke. And for days, he's out of it. And then he passes. He dies. David hears that fool has died. Got to get that right. And David comes back and asks Abigail to marry him. Smart man. God specializes in showing his power in our hopeless situations. That's his specialty. When the way's not clear, God creates a route where there was no way out. That's what God does. That's what he did before the foundations of the earth, because Jesus knew all the complexities and the twists and turns and options and possible pitfalls, choosing the exact route necessary for our freedom, for our liberty, for our salvation. Long before the earth was even created, God's plan came to being. Paul says it this way Jesus made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men and being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself. Do you see a connection? Jesus, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, plan for mankind involves him humbling himself and coming to earth in the form of a bondservant. He lowered himself. He became of no reputation. Royalty acting like common folk. And he became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Jesus took the punishment for our sins. He took our punishment. He did what he had to do because we, folks, we were dead. We had no pulse. We were dead in our trespasses. That's our condition. No hope. We're helpless. Unable to do anything to save ourselves. Dead. And we needed to be rescued. We needed to be reconciled. We needed to be forgiven. And the only way that can happen is through grace. And that grace had a price. And that price was Jesus' life. See, God saw the big picture. Before the world was even created, he saw the picture. He saw the what ifs. He put together a plan to save you and me. He knew the route. He knew the best route moving forward. He knew all the twists and turns because Jesus was not satisfied with the status quo. He couldn't leave us dead. Where we see chaos, he sees order. Where we see our fear and our failure, where we see that what we're doing is never good enough. What do I do now? Where can I go from here? That's what we see. We see despair. We see brokenness. That's a result of our choices and circumstances. And he has the ability to zoom in and zoom out and see the big picture because he has real-time perspective. He's not limited by the same physical boundaries that we are. We see loss and hopelessness. We can't get past our hurt and our pain. And he sees our situation and he's moved by our hurt and our pain. He wants to help. All he needs is an invitation. What if love was greater? Demonstrates his love for us. And that while we were dead in our sin, Jesus Christ, God's one and only Son, died for us. Oh, his love is greater. His love so powerful. Because it was love that brought Jesus to earth. It was love for you and for me. It was love that took Jesus to the cross, because his eyes never left you. He always had a plan for you. He suffered and he died with you in mind. Love motivated saving grace. Behold, the Father's love. The mystery that he lavishes on us. As deep cries out to deep, how desperately he wants us.
The things of earth stand next to him like a candle to the sun.